Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. We are in Lesson 5 at 1 Peter, Wednesday night Bible lesson series. It's good to have you with us. Let's jump in. Let's see here. Let me just make one change here real quick. All right. What do we have here? 1 Peter, we've talked about it a little bit before. It's a general epistle. It was written to the churches in what is modern day Turkey. It was Asia Minor at the time. And listen to me. Peter was nice enough to let us know exactly why he wrote it. There was persecution going on there. And he wanted to support them. Give them some support. Give them some direction. And lift them up. So today we're going to pick back up. We are in chapter 3. Now, as we enter chapter 3, it's funny. Remember when Peter wrote this letter, it was not broken down into chapters and verses. And we enter chapter 3, but it's a continuation of the previous thought on authority and Christian behavior. And when we look at this, it goes through verse 7. So it shifts. We have just been talking about last week governmental authority. It shifts to the home and what needs to be going on there. And this section is one the world likes to have an absolute fit with. But I break these 7 verses down personally. I break them down into 3 different sections. The first section is women to be subject to their husbands and why, adornment, and then husbands' responsibilities and how they interact. I break this 7 verses down into that. Let's see what it actually says as we jump into this. And I apologize tonight. We don't have anybody running the keyboard, so I won't be putting the slides up. So grab your Bible and follow along. 1 Peter chapter 3 starts, "Wives, in the same way, submit yourself to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives." Again, this is a carryover from chapter 2. Same reasoning. In chapter 2, Peter was talking about, follow the rules, follow the law. Don't be breaking the law. Be a model citizen because it will attract people to Christ. And additionally, he went on to say there too, live such a life that if somebody starts accusing you of something, people honestly probably won't believe it. And that's kind of what, again, with women here too, because guys say stuff, women say stuff about other women and so forth, and you never know when someone might say, well, X, Y, or Z, but if the husband knows the character of his wife, that can prevent a lot of things, if you will. Now, here's the thing. Could somebody not say in the past section, well, I don't agree with the government. Well, they tax us too much. Or with they whatever. They've gone to war with whoever or whatever. Yes, they can. Same way, could not a woman say something about her husband or a husband say something about his wife? Well, they don't do this or well, they don't do that. They burn the dinner. At least you notice I said they burn the dinner because I do all the cooking. It's not necessarily a women's thing there. But it can go both ways. It can go both ways. But here's the kicker. There's no buts. There's no buts. You can read that last section about the government, and you say, yeah, but they're this, that, or the other. Well, I can say, and by the way, This is about marital responsibilities because it doesn't address ladies' roles. It addresses the roles of men as well. Literally in the heading in my Bible I have marital responsibilities of husband and wife. You know, a lot of people like to look at this section here, relax. And as, you know, I've used this analogy and I like it a lot. And I know y'all have heard it again, but talking about a marriage is kind of like two people on a road trip. You have to have somebody with their hands on the wheel and on the gas pedal and on the brake. If you have two people trying to steer the car and doing that, you're going to wreck. And that does not mean by any means that the driver doesn't pay attention to the needs of the passenger. And that doesn't mean sometimes the passenger and drivers don't switch places. You know, people, the world wants to say, can like to say how bad this is. But that's when done properly, when it is not. In actuality, you have different roles. And we'll see that here in a minute. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And then he kind of bumps into adornment. And there's a little bit of sidestep here. He's talking about the ladies, and it's almost like he goes, oh yeah, by the way, don't adorn yourself too much, basically. Your beauty should come from within, not everything you do to make yourself look beautiful, because that's just on the outside. And it's just like then, just like today. A lot of people pay so much attention to the outside of a person and don't pay attention to the type of person that they are. All right, as fancy hair and jewelry are physical attributes or adornments to a physical attribute, kindness, modesty, honesty, caring are all attributes that make a wife more attractive to a husband who pays attention. I remember, this was a long time ago. I don't think I was married yet. Don't think so. There's this new lady started at the business I was at, and I thought, wow, she is good looking. And within a few weeks, I thought, what in the world were you first thinking when you looked at this person? I don't mean this bad. She was vile. She was nasty. Nasty mouth on her. She was just not a nice person. And, you know, I think more than likely most of us have run into a similar type of situation. Your first thought ends up not being your second thought or third or fourth or fifth. I remember when I first met Karen, I thought, oh, she's cute. And I didn't think she was drop dead gorgeous. I thought she was cute. A little bit later in the evening, we were talking, and, you know, she had this Union Jack up, and I'm like, what's that all about? And she's like, well, you know, she spent a couple summers in Europe in exchange programs and stuff, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And the more I got to know her and understood who she was, the more I was attracted to her. So it's, you know, the person she is made the physical attributes so much more. She didn't have to wear a lot of makeup. She didn't have to wear gold in her hair and all this stuff and everything. But let's see what Peter says here. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3. I better be careful. She's not here. I'm going to have to tell her to go back and listen to it. But chapter 3, verse 3, it says, your beauty should not come from outward adornments, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give away to fear. Now the world's going to say, what, do you expect me to call my husband my Lord? No, things are different then. The way we address people are certainly different than there is today. There's no one in their right mind would say women need to run around and say my Lord to their husbands. Give me a break. But now, you never know what people in the world are going to say. But as we move on, now it comes to the responsibility of the husband. It says, husbands, in the same way. What way? What we've just been talking about. In the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker party and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. There's definitely a couple things I want to touch on here. Well, first of all, it says, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wife, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner. Oh, don't people like to get up in arms about that? Okay. How many ladies here, if you would have been, when you were still married, 3 o'clock in the morning, window breaks downstairs, you're going to go, I'll take care of this, honey, and get up and go downstairs and run off the burglar? It's not going to happen like that. Now, are there some defined roles in each? Sure. To be blunt, most women generally do the cooking, and the majority of the, Paul, when he's got a problem, he calls his mother. If he wants to be told what to do about it, he'll call me. She likes to work him through the process, And, there's nothing wrong with, if a guy does the laundry, there's nothing wrong with that, or a woman does the laundry, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some things. If y'all were driving down the road and you stop and some guy gets out in the car in front of you and comes to you with a baseball bat and the car dies, generally the wife is not going to be trying to protect the husband. There is generally universally, there is a physical difference between men and women. There's nothing wrong with that. But one thing that is sad today, the world wants women to try to be men. Are you kidding me? That's what the world wants. But the world doesn't realize, or the world doesn't want them to realize exactly how special they are. Speaking from a guy's perspective, can't get me to do almost anything just by asking. She has a lot of sway and power. She does. And as it moves on here's something that's really important that I think sometimes is messed over, because they got to stop and talk about the weaker partner statement. But then it says, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. We are co-heirs with our spouse. And we should, as a spouse, put a very high priority on helping our spouse stay faithful and get to heaven. That should be both of us working for the other. We are co-heirs here. There is not, well, I'm a guy, I'm going to go to this heaven, and the ladies go down here. That's silly stuff. It's nothing biblical whatsoever. The world likes to pit men against women. That's also to say, Satan likes to pit men against women, but that is not what God wants. We are, in fact, co-heirs. Look at this last part. And to the men here, it says, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Just said, you better be treating them right because they're co-heirs. You better be protecting them and taking care of them, because if you don't, your prayers can be hindered. Think about that. That's huge. Really, it is. Let me ask you a question. Isn't that kind of the guy's responsibility, or the husband's responsibility, to make it where the wife wants to submit to the husband? Think about that in a minute. What wife would willingly or gladly submit to a husband that only thinks of themselves? I don't know if one would willingly or gladly do that. But if a husband is treating his wife with respect, love, doing for her all the time, that will soften her heart. Thus, also the other way around. If the wife is treating the husband correctly, it can soften their heart. Husbands, if your wife is godly and she sees all that you are doing for her, your love, commitment, honesty, protection, providing, etc., would your wife not be more apt to, quote unquote, submit? And here's a kicker: when you cannot come to an agreement. How often should a wife have to submit? To be blunt, very rarely. Because if two people cannot sit and have a conversation and come to a mutual agreement out of respect, there's something wrong. In my opinion, there's something wrong. Just like that, can't have two hands on the wheel. You're driving down the road. If the passenger needs to use the restroom, you find a place for the passenger to use the restroom. You don't just keep going on and on and on. In my opinion, and y'all can say what you want, if a husband has to use his authority, that's a joke off a show, I'm not going to say ever there's something wrong, but if they have to use it, in my opinion, this is just me, if they have to use it once or twice a year, there's something wrong. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Now, it may be different in others, but people should be able to work that out, and that's how it's intended to be. Now, as we... I have a note here. Husbands will be held accountable for mistreating their spouse. That's what that says. Think about it. It's saying you better treat her right, because if you don't, your prayers are going to be hindered. Now, some people think, this is something we'll come on to at another time as well, some people think God hears all prayers. I say, I agree. Does he necessarily listen to all prayers? Can be a difference. Someone that is let me ask you a question. Here's a hypothetical question. You have 4 kids, or however many kids, as long as it's plural. And one of them does what they're supposed to. Helps, does the right thing, so forth. And one of them absolutely is horrible, the way they act. If both of them come to you and ask you for something, are you likely to treat those requests exactly the same? Paul at times, he has always been a really good kid. But quite frankly, if he would have been misbehaving, say we went somewhere and would have been misbehaving or something, and we're in the proverbial checkout line, and he wants something, he ain't going to get it. But he's been a good kid. Hey, could I have? And I have the ability. Maybe spoiled him too much, maybe not. But a lot of times we did more for Paul because he is a really good young man. And that's something we should consider. Think about that. If we are children of God, now if we've got a horrible person, is God may hear him, but will he respond the same to that person or to a faithful person? Prayers of a faithful person are a powerful thing, are they not? All right, moving on. Now we're actually getting into the next section. Chapter 3, verse 8 through chapter 4, verse 19 is talking about persecution. Verse 8 says, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble." It's pretty straightforward. I kind of personally like these sections where they're saying, do this and don't do that. Because that's exactly what we have right here. He's saying this is the way you should act in verse 8. Be like-minded, sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Then there's the shift. Verse 9, here's the don't be like this. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessings, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and sees many days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. Verse 12. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. What did I just talk about? About how God listens, how, prayers of a righteous person is a powerful thing. Right here, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. That's Psalm 34, by the way, if you were curious. We need to remember, all we have to do is look right back there at verse 7. Nothing will hinder your prayers. And if you mistreat people, it's something you need to take seriously into consideration. As we move forward now, verse 13. Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. And he goes on to say, always be prepared to give an answer To everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Then there's a caveat. But do this with gentleness and respect. Because if you don't, it's going to fall on deaf ears, to be blunt. And I ask the question of all of us tonight, have you thought about that? Have you thought about what you would say if someone asked many different questions? Why are you a Christian? Why do you go to church where you go to church? Why do you believe in God? Or why doesn't this bother you? Ladies, we have a number of widowed ladies here tonight. You need to think about things for your protection at home. Do you know where you'd go if you hear somebody breaking in your house? Do you know what you would do? I'm going to get in that closet and I'm going to take this and put it up underneath there so they can't get in the door. Have you thought about that sort of stuff? If you haven't, when it's happening is not the time to do it. Now, this is true for any number of situations. For those that can't see the audience, we have a plethora of widowed ladies. That's why I use that as an example. But that can be for anything. It's good to think ahead in life. One of the lessons we had at preaching school, we were often encouraged, you need to think about how you're going to react when XYZ happens. That way, when XYZ happens, you've already thought through that process. And that's why I asked the question about when it says, know what you're going to say, basically, and do it respectfully. Verse 15. No, verse 16. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. For it is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered once for sin, the righteousness for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. After being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits, to those who were disobedient long ago when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. Okay. Boy, timing's bad because this is going to take a minute or two. We may stop here and we'll pick this up next week. Here's some, thanks to the King James Bible, there's people that think Jesus went to hell and preached to the spirits in hell. No, he didn't. Hades is not hell. Hades is a place of waiting where he went. There's 2 sections. Y'all seen the video on this. There's torment and paradise. Jesus said when he was on the cross, you will be with me today in paradise. Okay? Just right there said, those who were disobedient long ago when God waited patiently in the days of Noah. Okay, this is long ago. They're waiting to the final judgment. We'll pick up on that next week because there's a couple things I want to touch on because it delves into verse 21. And this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also, not the removal of dirt. So I'm just going to wrap right here real quick. We'll pick up right there next week and go through that section real quick and then on into chapter 4. Appreciate everybody being with us tonight. Remember, don't let the world influence you for evil. Thought process. I was talking about how men and women, how the world wants men and women and husbands and wife in conflict. That's not what God wants. And they like to use some of the verses out of 1 Peter chapter 3, and they do it incorrectly. That's not what God has intended for marriage. I thank you all and hope you have a wonderful evening. We will talk to you all soon. Bob and Edith, glad to see y'all are doing okay. We'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.